Today, a new dawn has broken, the sun has risen, and a new empire has been born. It is with great honor and pride that I, your President, Thomas H. Ridley, be the first to welcome all of you to the United Sarin Empire. The crowd burst into the loudest cheers yet. For a solid minute all around the two empires, all that could be heard was the sound of rejoice. It was the only thing on everyone's mind, and as the crowd abated, the President continued. Less than 1 hour ago, the first members of the United Sarin Empire met the first members of the Respia Empire, and the great pairing took place. We are now one empire, one people, and one voice. We will no longer be without a brother or a sister or a friend, for everywhere we turn, we will be together. The crowd once more interrupted the President to applaud and cheer. Tom knew he had moved them, and in turn he was touched. He continued, "It is my promise to all of you that I will serve all of our best interests now and in the future, and furthermore, I will devote all of my energy towards the promotion of freedom around our empire." He paused. Freedom. That word should have new meaning for all of us today. We are all free, and we are all equal. We can't be consumed by our petty differences. We will overcome all obstacles, and should we win the day, we shall be stronger and better for all of our futures, and this day will forever be remembered as the beginning of that future. He concluded, "Today we speak in one voice. Today we celebrate our Dependence Day." The crowd exploded into a standing ovation, and all around the United Sarin Empire and New Sarin the sound of celebration could be heard, because now it was official that the pairing was complete. This now meant a number of privileges would be available to all. For a limited time, free flights would be available to all citizens, so they could cross the 3,000-mile-wide Kermara Ocean and interpopulate. There would be no restrictions on travel and trade, and the United Sarin Empire was now twice the size it used to be. For its inhabitants, it was literally a whole new world. The Presidential Guard watched Tom like a hawk as he shook hands with a few lucky people at the front of the massive crowds barely held back by the barriers. He had not been meeting and greeting for long before his advisor ushered him away to the waiting limousine and on to the next engagement. A contingent of the guard were already in helicopters hovering above. As the convoy moved out, they followed along, maintaining their aerial vigilance. Tom was still shaking as he melted into the plush leather seat of the limo. He was convinced he'd made a couple of mistakes, but everyone was telling him it was a perfect delivery. He didn't know so well. As he wiped his sweating brow with his handkerchief, Linson was still congratulating him. "Fantastic, Tom. Just great. You had 'em crying with joy. Oh, what a sight. That, my friend, was textbook. I'll be surprised if we've not just doubled our voter count." Linson was thinking of the numbers. He was happy to let Tom get all the limelight if it meant that eventually he'd get his time there too. "I just hope I was sincere enough. I was so goddamn nervous I nearly forgot part of it." Tom had built up to it for so long, dreaming of how it would go, that he was convincing himself that he'd screwed it up, when there was no evidence of that. No, you were great, trust me." "I hope I can have some time to relax. Maybe tomorrow?" Tom innocently reasoned. "Not a chance. I'm afraid we're all tied up for the next 3 days. Morning till night, buddy. Sorry." Oh well, no rest for the wicked, Tom thought to himself. He was so fascinated with this new world, but he knew he wasn't going to get a chance to see much of it until the parties and meetings were over. Then he'd have to start running the place after that. No rest indeed. Back at Columbia Fields, James had just finished his after-flight check of AF-1 and had moved back to the hotel where he and the other off-duty Sarin guests were staying. Usually he stayed with the guard agents, and he was used to less opulent surroundings, but this was the finest place he had ever stayed at. By the time James had finished his shift, the President had finished his speech, and as such he'd missed history while still being a part of it. He showered and went down to the bar to watch the TV coverage, while sampling the best of New Saren's alcoholic drinks. There were other crew relaxing in the lounge, but he preferred to drink alone. It was just his way, and he hardly knew most of them anyway. If he was honest, he was missing his brother. They were virtually inseparable back home, and this was one of the first times he had been away for any length of time. From the age of 10, they'd had to rely on each other after their father died in a plane crash. From that point on, they lived with their uncle, who was also a pilot. He encouraged them to join the Air Force when they were old enough. He had served and fought in the Neymarian War, and had seen the potential they both had as pilots. So at 16, James joined the Army to fly helicopters, and his brother Justin joined the Air Force to fly fighters. It was the longest they were apart, but once they were through training, they were based near each other. From there, they clocked up thousands of flying hours between them, and were both decorated more than once for various combat missions in the Laotian War. Through it all, they were lucky enough to be able to stay together, flying and fighting side by side. When it came to this mission, however, it fell to James to take it on. He joined the presidential flight and became part of them when he wasn't flying normal missions, a path that Justin wasn't interested in, as it would take him away from home too much. Now James saw the point of that decision. Here he was, further away from his brother than ever, experiencing a truly amazing, touching event. Alone. As he sank the last remnants of his Somrian sunrise cocktail, he made his way to the front desk to arrange a phone call to Saren. He hoped to reach his brother and then retire to his room for a few hours' sleep. After all, he had been flying all night and was beginning to catch up on him. James was fast asleep by the time President Ridley had reached his fourth reception in Columbia City. The second crew had taken over AF-1 that afternoon, taking Tom and company onwards to the capital of Marsden. It had been a long day, with only a small amount of time to rest on the flight. Now the sun had set, and Tom was arriving at the Emperor's Palace in the capital, the final destination of the day, and what a day it had been. A lot better than he had expected on the whole, he thought to himself, but then he had always set his personal standards high. It was the only way to reach the level that he had reached, and he was now truly enjoying the reward. The Imperial Palace was certainly a sight to behold. Elegant white stone adorned the outside, lit by warm golden lights. All kinds of tropical flora and fauna decorated the pristine, colorful gardens surrounding the palace that seemed to stretch on forever. He was looking forward to reaching his room in the palace and then joining the party after a long bath. A drink would be nice, too. Not to mention, well-deserved.